Welcome to Live Stories, everybody. I am so excited to be talking to you guys. I'm your host, Liv Lewis, and I'm so grateful for all of you who are listening, and I hope you all are doing well. I am very excited because today I am chatting with the one, the only Kalilah Wright. And for those of you who are new to the podcast, I start every conversation by sharing a snippet about Kalilah in her own words. And this is intentional because I want you all to get to know her as she shares parts of herself that's vulnerable and not what you're going to typically hear from a bio, which it's quite impressive, if I might say so myself. So here is Kalilah in her own words. I'm a mom, designer, architect, and creative that has a passion for fashion and art. I'm a boisterous woman that found her voice through her mess and made them into a message. I mean, come on, writer. You better write. How you doing?
Hey girl, thanks again
Hey,
for
girl.
having me.
Ah, first of all, thank you so much for your time and for being here today. And I first want to make sure that you know and my listeners know how much this means to us for you to kind of share. I know some of the things that you're going to talk about is a little sensitive and vulnerable. So I thank you for your bravery. And I also want to get right into this piece about, finding your voice and through your mess. And I want to kind of ask you who you believed you were in that process in finding your mess and turning it into a message.
So I think that, for me, taking my mess, I've always been a person that was always boisterous
Mm-hmm.
and expressive. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it to come across like I'm a person who was timid or shy or didn't
Right.
know where my voice was. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that over the years, I finally learned, maybe how to use my voice, how to use
Mm-hmm.
your power. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's something important that a lot of people, sometimes don't understand,
Right.
because they are, for whatever reason, whether it's personality wise or, they just haven't found, how to make them, their voice, their mess work for them. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think that's
Mm-hmm.
what I really meant is like over the
Yeah.
years, I was able to, navigate by letting the things that I deemed as a mess turn it into
Mm-hmm.
something that was more positive.
I love that because a lot of people think they don't already have the things within them to persevere or to go through a journey or to go through a high or a low. And the more, at least I get older and get more mature, I realize a lot of that stuff is already in me. It's just learning how to channel it into
100%.
TBD thing. Right, right, right. So we're talking about, of course, lived stories is about women who've gone through divorce and lived to share what they learned and how they came through. And I want to kind of start at the beginning of what you believed marriage is and was, and when you got married.
Yeah, really interesting, I think, conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really excited that you are, highlighting this because I think, right now everybody with a podcast mic and internet and, they think they know, but
Right,
they
right.
have no real idea. And a lot of the people who are giving advice, saying certain things, have never even been married, so I
Right.
think that it is so cool that you are giving these lived stories, and allowing for us to share from our mess and the things that we could have changed or done
Mm-hmm.
better, or
Mm-hmm.
so it's beautiful. So I will say that growing up, I don't think I had a true example of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure if I really like saw, my dad was married, but I didn't live with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And he had an interesting, like, sort of just marriage. I'm Caribbean, I'm Jamaican, so just like, I will say my very first like boyfriend, his parents were married. And again,
Mm-hmm.
from just the view of what I was seeing at like 14, 15 years old, they were seemingly very loving,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a really good partnership and union. But I never like lived with like a couple or people
Right.
who are together and
Mhm.
and showing partnership.
Yeah.
So I don't think I really understood what that was. I
Mhm.
knew like I wanted to get married. It was something that I aspired to do.
Mhm.
I believed in partnership and monogamy, and I wanted like one partner, and I
Yeah,
wanted a
yeah, yeah.
family and all these other things. And so, just from my thoughts on social media and like, or movies, actually, Disney movies,
Mhm.
my
Mhm.
thoughts were developed like through those lenses. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think for me, I just believe that marriage was this union, partnership of two people. I think that I knew that there was going to be rocky roads ahead,
Mhm.
figuring out financial. But I do think that when I first got married, I definitely believed in the very like naiveness maybe of being like a young
Mhm.
adult. And I'm like, I think I truly believed in people who could get married after meeting after like one day. I thought that if
Really.
you
Mhm.
felt it and if it's what you like, I think that was the energy and mess that I
Mhm.
was
Mhm.
definitely given. I was just like, if you met someone and it felt right,
Yeah.
I think that can last forever. Like that was, I think, the perception that I
Mhm.
had at that
Yeah.
time about
Now, you
marriage.
said it felt
I thought
right.
love
Like
would,
what? No, I'm
yeah, I
sorry.
thought
Finish.
love will conquer it all. Like that's
Mhm.
what I thought. Hmm.
Mm. And post that thought and post going through some mess, what is your
Yep.
thinking now?
So I personally think, and maybe, just for some of this context and
Mhm.
information, I married someone that was Jamaican, but he
Mhm.
was born in Jamaica, lived in Jamaica. We got married in Jamaica, and he
Mhm.
transitioned and came to America for me and for our marriage and together. And so I
Mm.
think that,
Mhm.
and then again, I was born in Jamaica, raised in
Yeah.
America, and still had very Jamaican roots, but
Mhm. Mhm.
raised in America. So
Right,
again,
right.
our, things were just really different with how we were truly raised. And so I will say that now that I have had time to think about certain things, I think, or, experience certain things, I do
Yeah.
think that religion plays a big part, like depending on, because I do know that there are a lot of people who, or a lot of, religions and different parts of the country where they didn't even meet and they've gotten married and
Mhm.
they last 30, 40 years and still some
Yeah.
of them in great love,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's not, but I think that there's definitely some elements about the
Mhm.
people, what you believe in,
Mhm.
how you
Mhm.
get through adversity. Like there's just so many different elements. So there are people that I personally think that can get married after, maybe knowing each other for a day or two or whatever. But
Yeah.
again, the percentage and the, of what of those actually last, for it
Mhm.
to last. And so even when I got married and divorced, and once I started looking at the statistics, they're
Mhm.
like the amount of people that end up getting divorced, like the number is very slim.
Really.
It is very slim, but not even just divorce because of, just if you married somebody from a different country, the amount of, it was like the rate was like, let's say even 97%. It was like something very high. So like for me to think that I could be a part of the 3% that would make it, and not to say it's
Wow.
impossible, but
Mhm.
when
Mhm.
so I think now that I'm older and I look at things
Mhm.
like that, I'm like,
Mhm.
girl, you ain't gonna be part of the 3%. Like it's very hard for you to get to that
I
part.
agree.
You probably are gonna fall. It's just a numbers game. You're gonna fall in the
Yeah.
97 percentile if it's that high. So it also just really shows you how
Mhm.
difficult that type of relationship and that type of marriage is.
Right,
And
right.
so and then I think as I got older too, I personally believe
You saying love isn't enough is where were you when I was in thick of things? Because I think when you're in love and you think like there's nothing we can't get through, but like there are things that you have to ask each other and understand about each other. Like, how do you fight? How do you resolve conflict? What did you see when you were growing up to think, um, to see if it's modeled and if it's healthy or not. And these are things that I wish someone would have told me when I was dating and also going into this marriage, because I'm thinking the same thing as you, and I'm from West African background. It's like, yeah, we got love and we got Jesus, we good.
Right.
And then you're in the marriage and you're like, where's the book
Ah,
for this? And I think
right.
it's interesting now too, because we didn't have social media. People weren't talking about these kinds of things. I mean, there was TV shows you watch, but some of the TV shows now we're realizing they were not real. They were all scripted. And so you are thinking that, like, well, this is what I see on TV. Why isn't it happening in my household? Only to find out, like, oh, that's not real.
Right. Or that's not the way it goes. That's not how they resolve conflict.
That's
Oh,
not how they
okay.
resolve
That's not what
conflict.
happens.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what age did you get married?
I got married, I want to say, I think I got married at around 27-ish.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was in, or maybe, yeah, I was in grad school and around maybe 26. I was already in
Mm-hmm.
grad school at the time. And yeah, 26, 27. And
Mm-hmm.
now that I look back at it, back on it as well, I had also, so we met in Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when I look back, I also had lost a very close friend of mine during that time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and not to say I wouldn't have married my ex-husband, but I do think that, when you're also experiencing grief and there's
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability and like, also I'm looking at life like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to, I don't, well, maybe at those times 30, coming up was
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a thing. And I was also, but I think I was more ready to like find my person, live my life
Mm-hmm.
with someone,
Mm-hmm.
start a family, so I think that I was in that space. And due to also my friend passing away and he was very close to
Mm-hmm.
me, I do
Yeah.
think that also played a part within like vulnerability as well.
Yeah, yeah. I could see that. I could see that. And so you get married and you got married
Yep.
in Jamaica. So I imagine like beautiful beach in my mind. Beautiful beach, sunny skies. How long were you married before you kind of started to realize like, oh, there's some bumps in the road?
So I think probably a year, no, less than a year, before a year.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
he came to America, I think right away. Like
Yeah.
we got married in July and I
Mm-hmm.
think by maybe October-ish, I remember he came and it was cold. So I feel like October, November-ish, he came to
Mm-hmm.
America.
Mm-hmm.
And probably like within the next year, I realized, ooh, it's gonna be a problem. You know what? Because it's just like I started to see, like there were several things, and I also share on my part the things that I also started to
Yeah.
see. I
Yeah.
think on my side, it was like I had a perception again of like my fairy tale of what I made up in my mind
Mm-hmm.
of what marriage looked like. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think for me, I really I didn't foresee, how he would handle conflict or,
Right.
and
Right.
we didn't have that many like conflicts and certain things in Jamaica. We had like,
Yeah.
it was vacation love and it was, and the weather was beautiful then. The skies, it smelled different when you're in love in the islands. And now you in America. Now is who gonna pay
They
this
don't smell like
bill when
that.
this work is happening? It
These
was
who's
just
gonna pay these bills?
all of it.
Yeah.
And there was just a difference, I think on his side, which I didn't
Mhm.
take into account, was even his adjustment. I don't think I took into
Mhm.
account like how he was gonna adjust in America. He didn't really, his family lived in Jamaica. They were able to visit and stuff, but he didn't really have friends here.
Okay.
He
Mhm.
was coming to a new place. And I always thought like I already had like my apartment here in Baltimore. So I thought like, all right, we'll just come, we'll break bread, everything will be good. We'll, boom, boom, boom. It's gonna be easy. Far from it. Yeah, far from it. And I
Mhm.
think that I just didn't take into account like the transitions that
Yeah.
both of us, I guess, had to go through.
I got you. So, how did you know that it was, because I'll just use myself as the example. There are bumps, and then there's the end. After year one, you said it was like, this ain't gonna, like, did you think like, how we gonna make this work, or was it like straight to like, nah, it's a wrap?
So our relationship had a lot of like bumpy roads.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We loved each other.
Yeah.
Almost like, I don't, toxic-ish. I don't know if toxic, that's the new word everybody would throw
That's a
around.
new.
But yeah,
Now
but
that you're looking at it, toxic, right?
yeah,
But
yeah, toxic-ish. Like, it was just, we just, number one, when somebody comes from a different place and you're in America, people always swear like, oh, it's for immigration purposes. I'm like, bring me to Jamaica, let me live in Jamaica. I don't It's not,
right,
but it wasn't
not with
it.
that.
It definitely wasn't about that, but
Mm-hmm.
it was very like, there was just a lot of differences, and I
Yeah.
think because I was raised Jamaican, I think
Mm-hmm.
that I thought that the differences we had, we were able to still be able, because
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just assumed, like, culturally, and like, still, our, like, how what our beliefs are very similar,
Yeah.
um culturally, anyway, in the cultural
Mm-hmm.
aspect. So I thought that that was going to help sustain our love. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that after some time, there was just some stuff that it just wasn't going to work. And I think, like, family and friends. And so I'll say one of the big things on, like, maybe that I was doing is,
Mm-hmm.
I thought life would remain the same. And maybe that's, again, a misconception of marriage that I had.
What
And
you
I'll make
mean will
sure.
remain the same?
So I thought, like, oh, okay, I can hang out with my girlfriends, and I can,
Oh.
and like, everybody
Mm-hmm.
will acclimate, and this will be one big happy family. I think that I thought that, but
Mm-hmm.
again, my ex-husband is a very rigid, very stern, very a Jamaican man, very protective, very, I'm not gonna
Really?
smile too much in public. I'm not gonna, you gonna know I'm a bad man if like, that's the vibe. And I'm all bubbly, and I'm like, hey, everyone. And he's like, and I'm like, so I would bring him to, like, work functions, and he like,
Uh-huh.
and I'm like, I'm a teacher. You gotta smile. I'm an architect. Like, you cannot just be. And so, like, things
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
that, it was just like a big clash.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
as well as, so I, just hanging out with my girlfriends. And so, like, right after he came to America, I think maybe that following year, I had a trip planned with my
Mm-hmm.
girlfriends to Thailand. And he was like,
Uh-oh.
Thailand? I just got here. What do you mean Thailand? And I'm like, my life was, going before this. I
Yeah.
didn't think that I needed, like, permission to go,
Ooh.
29
Mm-hmm.
hours
Mm-hmm.
across the, globe. And so, again, I think that my perception of maybe what marriage and, even compromise, and,
That's
or
a
just
big
even
word.
understanding his feelings about things like that, I don't think that I took any of that into account. Like, I was
Mm-hmm.
looking at it like, well, what's the big deal? Like, I say,
Yeah.
I've been saving up. These my girlfriends, these are my friends
Yep.
from for however long. Like,
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
is there an issue?
Mm-hmm.
And and so I don't think that I understood some of those things. In addition, I would say, certain maybe mental health, like, or just like depression, like, in the
Mm-hmm.
sense of, he's been in the country, and, like, he doesn't have any friends. He's not,
That's
so
right.
there was
No
certain things that
family,
maybe,
no
looking
village.
back,
Yeah.
right, I could
Yeah. Yeah.
tell now, like, he was possibly depressed. Like, there was
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and I wasn't looking at it that way. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
what's going on? Like, why you
Like,
not,
you in America,
yeah, like,
everything's
how we
irie. I had to say it.
exactly, yeah. So I think that not looking at those things and being
Mm-hmm.
understanding to those things as well on his part was probably definitely, something
Yeah.
that I would say for me, that if I could go back, like, I would have looked at differently.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there was a lot of, unfortunately, we experienced a lot of issues.
Mm-hmm.
And it became a bit emotionally abusive, in a sense.
Mm.
because I think he was angry. Like he was angry that, I left there, I'm here, and now it's like not working out. And, and then we were kind of fussing all the time and we had a baby. And like even
Mm-hmm.
that became challenging, just
Right.
with a new kid. And again, your beliefs. If you're not on the same page when it comes to parenting and like, asking certain questions about
Mm-hmm.
parenting and like, how you would handle certain things. He had a daughter prior to us
Mm-hmm.
getting married, but again, I wasn't really too involved in his parenting and how he
Mm.
parents. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think with our son, again, I just from his values or how he moved, I always just thought he would be great
Yeah. Yeah.
at just fatherhood. And but unfortunately it was just like there was a lot that I just think that I thought love and relationship would sustain our marriage, but
Yeah.
all of these other elements became a part of it.
Mm-hmm. What and it's so funny that you say like I wish I'd have known or asking some questions or asking the right questions. Isn't it crazy when you look back at situations you're like, I can't believe I didn't ask, or I can't believe I didn't know how this person would act in this situation, right? And again, I only equate this to now you see a lot of like social reels and you see, all the therapists and all the right questions and the TikToky, you know what I mean? So it's just kind of like, yo, like what questions do you think you'd have asked now that you know as it relates to the parenting aspect of it? Like,
Well, I'll say before even a parenting aspect, and I
mm-hmm.
wouldn't even ask any questions. I would just observe better.
Yeah.
And when I
Ooh,
say
that's
that,
good. Mm-hmm.
from my current partner, and
Uh-huh.
he's Jamaican as well.
Yeah.
But what I've learned in the years now, because it's been, my son is about to be 11, so I have been
Mm-hmm.
divorced, several years now. But what I have learned within this experience is just
Mm-hmm.
character. And
Yes,
if
that's
I
huge.
paid more attention to how he fathered his daughter, how he, responded to his mother, how he,
Mm,
like just even just responded to his sister or handled conflict or, so a lot of the times we try to blame like maybe our environments and say like, oh, it's because I'm in this place or I'm stressed out or work or
right,
money.
right.
To me, what I've learned, especially with my current partnership, like it just doesn't even matter
Mm-hmm.
how it, when you are like upset at someone, how you treat them, that says it all. Because my
Yep.
current partnership, no matter how much we might bicker or like
Mm-hmm,
something's
mm-hmm,
going on, there's just never disrespect. There's
mm-hmm,
never like, there's just certain words that just
mm-hmm.
won't come across, like just
Yeah.
paying attention to people's character. So now when I'm looking at social media and people are just always so gung ho about financial and like, oh, my partner needs to be this and look like this and do this and do that. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
how's that man going to treat you when he is mad at you? Like, that's like the
Yes.
biggest. That
That's
man going to
it.
treat you when you can't, like, you just had a baby and or you need somebody to change you or who knows what.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
to me those type of things are just things that we are not looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
just really learned that. And I mean, it's not easy to find.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm just grateful that I was able to see the opposite side of the coin because I
Mm-hmm.
only knew one side, and that side wasn't pretty. And
Yeah.
I'm grateful that I'm able to see the other side.
I mean, my mind just exploded because that whole paying attention to a person's character
Yeah.
and like slowing down to double click. You know what I mean? Like that's like major.
And that's why I said too at the beginning where I believed in like love at first sight and like saying
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, you could jump into something and be like, oh, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
now that I'm older, I'm just like, you need more time to really assess this person. And the only way
Yeah.
you're gonna be able to tell if they're, is with time.
With
You know,
time.
and
Yeah.
just seeing how do they move?
Yeah.
How does someone handle something when it's and when the, when the ground drops from underneath them? Are
How
they,
do they?
short with you? Are they upset with you? Or are they going to be like, okay, how can we resolve this? What can we do together? How can we, and the only way you see that is with time.
Yeah, I love that. And then also too, what is your reaction to their reaction? Because that then also tells a lot about what you can tolerate and then what you can accept. I was talking to another young lady about this exact conversation, and she said something like, learn you can only tolerate something for so long, and some people think that they see something they can tolerate forever but not really. You can never tolerate anything for long periods of time unless you accept that that is a person's trait and character, and if you accept it, then that's it. So there's like balance of like tolerating a person's bad habits and
Yep.
accepting a person's character is a huge thing to pay attention to as you continue. As for my listeners who are listening and are in a relationship or exploring, like I wish somebody would have been like, well, what's his character? But I actually can say his character was okay. There are other things that I didn't pay attention to in our dating scenario or relationship. But so you're in this situation, you now realize that like, ooh, this ain't gonna work out. You got a son. How are you able to now decipher? You're in a fork in the road between like ending or continuing.
So I'll tell you again, my divorce and my everything got really messy, very messy.
Okay.
Messy in the sense of, it just did not end well at all.
Okay.
And you know, I was at a fork in the road because again, there was a lot of like love and there was a lot of
Yeah.
lust.
Yeah.
Like we had a lot of attraction towards each other.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
we would always kind of like make up, but then things will always get volatile
Mm-hmm.
and blown out and it would be crazy. And I
Mm-hmm.
think at one point when I realized like, okay, maybe because I started seeing a therapist
Okay.
because and I was trying to encourage him to see a therapist as well. And so
Mm.
I found a Jamaican woman. She was a queer woman. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if that mattered too much with him, but
Mm-hmm.
I wanted somebody who was Jamaican,
Yeah.
understood the
Yeah.
culture. So it was great. So we found a Jamaican woman,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, perfect. And so, I realized like I started to, because I didn't want to get divorced. I really
Yeah.
loved my ex-husband and I was like, okay, I don't want to get divorced. So I was just like, okay, maybe if I can help him resolve the things that he feels are a problem for him, then we can be better. So I'm like, okay, he was
Mm.
struggling with employment, with, maybe the type of job he was getting, with like education, where he wanted to go, where he wanted his life to go. So I
Right.
kept on like kind of saying, okay, maybe if I take on some of his burdens, because at that time I'm
Ooh.
in school, I'm in doing
Mm-hmm.
architecture. I found myself, I think,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I'm good, but I was just like, maybe if I took on some of his baggage burden that and carry it for him, that we could make it down the road better. And
Mm.
it was weighing me down. It was weighing me down.
Mm-hmm.
It was weighing me down. And how I felt, this was just the analogy that I felt is like my ex-husband wanted to lead, but he was leading us out in the water to drown. Like that
Mm-hmm.
is exactly how I felt all the
Yeah.
time. He
Yeah.
would
So no
say, like, he
safety.
would be upset that I was emasculating him, that I wasn't, letting him, whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
then anytime I said, all right, let me hands off, let me let you, we
Mm.
would be far out in the ocean. We are
Mm-hmm.
drowning. My son
Mm-hmm.
is leading a life raft and he was not saving us. And for
Mm.
that, I couldn't continue that cycle of
Yeah. Yeah.
watching us, like just drown. And like he was just to me doing certain things and just ill treating me on top of it. And
Mm-hmm.
it was
Mm-hmm.
just like, so after some time, I was just like, this to me isn't what they had on,
The show that you
Steve
were watching.
Urkel, what was the one with Steve Urkel and the family? Not Full House. Oh my
Family Matters.
matter. This ain't what Laura and her and Steve, like this wasn't what
They gonna talk it out.
their parents was going through. So I just told myself, I was just like, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but
Mm-hmm.
I just knew that this wasn't it.
Mm-hmm.
We had I don't really touch on it too much, but we had some, like domestic violence type
Mhm.
of, but it was very more emotionally abusive than I would say
Yeah.
physical. But,
Mhm.
even in that, like, when I went down to, like kind of file a protective order and, some of the questions that were asked, and it is so, and the only reason I'm really even again talking about this on the show is because I feel like women who are in especially emotionally abusive relationships, you don't
Mhm.
know that they like, because you don't see it. You don't see a black eye, you
Mhm.
don't see bruises, you don't see cuts, you don't see, so you like,
Mhm.
how, am I making this up? Is it, but
Mm.
then I just really had to, some of the questions they ask you, like if you are in an abusive relationship, and I,
Mhm.
selected yes, and I was like, wow. And that was, very
Mm.
eye-opening for me, because I was just like, almost like I didn't think I would be again in this percentage of
Yeah.
women to go through
Yeah.
something like that.
Mm.
So that became, really hard. And I think that was, and my son was really young, only
Mm.
maybe around 2 years old at the time, 3 years old. And I had like my dream job. Things were going really well in my career. Things were
Mhm.
great. And I just remember one day really like having to look in the mirror, and I think like we got in a big argument, and it was just like a crazy argument. I think the police ended up getting called. I
Oh
was late
wow.
for work, and I just was like, I was like, he's fucking with my livelihood. He's fucking with
Right.
my craft. He's fucking with my
Mhm.
creativity. And that's when I was like, I love me too much to have
Mm.
somebody ruin
Mhm.
my livelihood. Like, because if
Yeah.
you fuck with my way of being able to feed my child, and like, most of our income really
Right.
relied on me. And so
Ooh.
the
Yeah.
fact that we could, lose our home or lose my car, or, and
Yeah.
it just was like, yeah, this
Mhm.
isn't it. And so
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
when I really, came to a fork in the road, where
Yeah.
I was just like, I don't think that I could continue to stay in this. And I loved him so much. I
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
wanted things to work, but I do honestly think that there were a lot of, mental things that was going on with him
Mhm.
as well.
Mhm.
And he didn't get the
The
type of
help he
support and
needed.
help that he needed. And so I had to make that decision to ultimately, walk
You
away.
know what? Black women are so strong because there's so much, like my heart started to beat when you said, you know what, let me take on his burden.
Mm-hmm.
Let me lighten his load, which is not our role. If I were to be like, I'm gonna keep it a buck, it may be a little bit controversial. Like marriage is a partnership, but the man leads
Mm-hmm.
and the woman supports, and there's a partnership there. But we as Black women, God, there's, and I'm akin to your story and what you were sharing because that's so us. Fine, I might drown. I'm gonna, and I started swimming over the summer. I can like float and tread water, and I feel like I could join the Olympics. Like, girl, like catch me with doing my breaststrokes. And when the swim coach was talking about the buoy they hold, when they save someone, they have to push the person up, but the buoy, the reason they have that red thing is because there's nothing you can do to submerge. So if they don't have that, they may drown. But when they're like saving someone, this buoy's keeping them up. So you
Mm.
have to hold yourself. So if you're trying to save a person and you also are drowning, like that's a recipe for disaster and death.
Right. Right.
And many women, and it's this the common denominators of all the stories that I'm collecting and hearing is about the fact that you realize things aren't working and you almost put yourself last to save a marriage, to save a man, to save a thing, not realizing that like you are also like killing yourself
Yeah. Yeah.
trying to make this thing work. And I'll never forget, like, when I felt like when I realized I wasn't how to make this decision, there was like it felt like someone was stepping on my chest almost. Like it felt so heavy and so tight because I was trying to solve for him, we had two young kids at the time, solve for him, his unemployment, the kids, and daycare, and the expenses, and let me find a therapist. Like you saying you trying to solve took me right back to me trying to solve. And it's like this common red thread of us as Black women trying to save these men who need to save themselves. I
Yeah.
just don't see
Yeah.
it.
And I think that once I realized that he didn't care almost. Like if I drowned, I was like, yeah,
Oh, hell no.
because you can't be
Mhm.
mean to me and, there's not an and.
Yeah.
Like you cannot be when I'm trying to save, you can't.
Yeah.
You're supposed
Yeah.
to praise and be, trying to make sure that
Mhm.
I'm good so
You're
that
good.
we can be good together. But,
Mhm.
I finally realized like, there was no way of me, like trying to help him to feel better for us to be better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I would say one thing that I did, which I do agree on in this, like saving, like so, I went through different processes of trying to
Mhm.
figure out what was best to like repair this. So at
Right.
one point I was like, you know what? F him. I was like, I'm going out with my friends. I'm doing
Mm.
me. I'm chilling. But I then realized, like, to me, that's not marriage. How
Yeah.
can I be good and he's
And then
not
you're
good?
not. Oh.
Like, so that's when it then said, okay, well, let me try to take on what he's carrying to see if that will be better and try to fix things. And again, it wasn't. So, it is a partnership, it is a
Mhm.
union. Both
Yeah.
people can't see each other drowning and not try to save each other.
Mhm.
And so that was
Mm.
definitely my fork in the road.
Mhm.
But I should throw in there and say
Yeah.
that even after we divorced, we were still dealings for a minute
Mm.
after, because it was just,
Mhm.
again, we loved, like there was a lot
Yeah.
of, we just loved each other.
Chemistry and
It was,
yeah.
it was.
Mhm.
But I had to, within my relationship and situation, I had
Mhm.
to truly learn boundaries.
Mm.
Just because it was just like my ex-husband didn't get it. Like, I didn't want a divorce because, of whatever. Like
Mhm.
I wanted him to get better. Like I wanted him to
Yeah.
seek help. I wanted him
Yeah.
to like stop drowning me. I wanted, so I loved him. I wanted it to work. And
Mhm.
so, me divorcing him, I said, like, let's get a divorce. Well, I went and did the divorce, and like we kind of made up. And I said, and it was probably the best thing I did. I said, let's
Mhm.
go through with the divorce. And if it's going to work, we get married again. It
Yeah.
ain't that
Yeah.
hard to go back and get married. I was like, we just get married again. But I was like, I think we should get a divorce. And I would say
Mhm.
that at the time I had a public defender, and she said, file for full custody. And I was like,
Ooh.
no, I don't think I need to. And she said, file
Mhm.
for full custody.
Mhm.
Do that because you just never know. You don't know how people are. You don't know what's going to be down the road, whatever, whatever. And I was like, I don't think I need to do that. She was
Yeah.
like, trust me, file for, and I did. And it was probably one of the best advice that I got, because
Wow.
now I have full custody of my son. It has
Mhm.
made life, I can't imagine having to ask my ex-husband on a daily basis any type of dealings with our son. Like we just don't even
Mm.
have that kind of relationship. So
Mhm.
I am and I will say, again, a lot of information that I don't share publicly,
Yeah.
but we got divorced under like egregious behavior, like someone mistreating you so badly that you end up like filing for divorce. And
Wow.
so it is
Mhm.
one of the hardest ways to get a divorce, because in Maryland you have
Really?
to be apart for a year and like
Mhm.
all these other things. And he wouldn't move out, and it was a lot.
Mm.
And so
What state are you? What state was this
Maryland,
in?
in
Maryland. Okay.
Maryland.
Got it. Got it.
And so
Mhm.
it was like there's some wording in there on the divorce decree, but it wasn't like erect, differences. It wasn't
Yeah.
that. It was
It
literally
was
like under
specific.
egregious behavior. And like even when
Wow.
I read that, I was just like, and to prove that in court, they said it's like one of the hard. But in 5 seconds after him being horrible with the judge, she was like, "Oh, you're granted." Like you
Ooh.
are granted this divorce. Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you. All right. And like
Mhm.
literally the judge was like, if this is how you're talking to me, I could
Mm.
only imagine
What's
how you talk at
happening?
home.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, did you have friends and family throughout this process, or were you kind of doing it alone?
Um, no, that's a whole other, like thing. I have a lot of friends. Like most of
Yeah.
my friends are from junior high school. So
Okay.
I
Oh
have a
wow.
lot of friends. I have a lot of like, well, not really a lot of family. I have
Mhm.
family, but I have a lot of friends.
Okay.
And my dad is very present and my dad lives in Maryland. And I think, again, to like protect him and sort of all of this stuff that was going on, I don't think I shared it too much with friends and family.
Mm,
And also my friends and family weren't married. So it was just like,
yeah, yeah.
sharing with them, they didn't understand. I do remember though, like some of the friends that I confided some things with. And I
Mhm.
will say, I always say one of the biggest mistakes that I made, two things that I take ownership of in my marriage that I
Yeah.
did. One, when we first had like a huge conflict,
Mhm.
I'm so ashamed to even say this out loud.
It's a
I
safe
sent
space.
I sent a group email to my girlfriends and he saw it. And I mean, the email,
Oh Lord.
yeah, he saw it. He definitely saw it. And I probably wasn't the nicest. Like I might have said some, sent his ass back. I don't know. There might have been some stuff in it.
Not deportation, Kalilah.
I might have said some stuff. I don't know. But
Yeah.
I just will say, I mean, but again, it was due
Mhm.
to some treatments and I was
Yeah,
upset,
you were in your feelings,
whatever.
yes.
But I
Mhm.
will say that if I could read, like I know that really hurt him. And he
Yeah.
probably carried that for a long time
Mhm,
because not
mhm.
only did I say the things that I said it to people that were around and that
Yeah.
were my friends and that were, so I think for that, like for him,
Mhm.
and he had parents that were married that are married and they're still
Mhm.
married for like
Mhm.
40, 50 years or whatever. And so I
Wow.
think for him, he was very much on the, you have issues at home, it stays at home, it don't go outside the
Mhm.
home, and all of those other things. So I
Mhm.
think for him it broke, maybe a lot of like the marriage home situation
Yeah, yeah,
for him. Like
keeping
that
yeah,
was a
yeah.
very, and I wish that, maybe I'm not gonna say I wish that I didn't, maybe the things that I said, but
Mhm.
that was
Mhm.
one.
Mhm.
um and I think that, like those type, and the second thing that I wish I did differently, he was a very private person. He
Okay.
did not like Instagram and Facebook and all
Mhm.
this other stuff. He did not like me like putting our dinners on social media. And
Mhm.
he didn't like, that when people, and I'm very popular, I'm very like out there on social
Yeah,
media and
yeah.
whatever.
You're
So like
boisterous
he would,
after all.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, so when I would go places, people are like, "Oh my God, I know
Yeah.
your husband. Hey, husband." And he's
And
like,
he's like,
he
sus.
gave this
Oh,
thing,
the face.
like, I'm not gonna smile. Bad man don't smile, And so, and that just
Oh my God.
gave it just really, that's
Mhm.
those type of things I think really on my part,
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
played a negative role in our marriage. And those are two things that I would say that,
Mhm.
so when it go back to now, friends and whatever.
Mhm.
I just remember, like, I shared with my friends some of the turmoil, some of the stuff, and then we would go back together. So a lot of the times when we did that, my friends are looking at me side eye like, she just said they did this and then he did that and
I
now y'all back
know.
together. So for me,
Mhm.
some of my friends, they said like, oh, it's a facade. Like
Mm.
like, oh, you just putting on a front. And I didn't feel like that. I still
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that what I've learned is, again, in love, you want it, like, especially if you love
Mhm.
that person, you want it to
Yeah.
work. So it
Yeah.
wasn't fake. It was that I loved you today and tomorrow I ain't nothing with you.
Yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah.
and so some
Yeah.
people couldn't fully understand that.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, but I definitely would say that it was hard to talk to like friends and
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
because I feel like there was a lot of maybe judgment. I wasn't
Mhm.
sure, what they would think and what they would say. But again, I love this person so much that
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
okay with being judged. Or if I decide, even after it all, even after
Mhm.
we got a divorce, we, made
Cutting
up
this
and
yeah.
broke up again or whatever, I was
Mhm.
still willing to
To try.
proudly walk him, with on my arm if he got the help and support that I feel like
Yeah.
he needed.
Yeah.
But it just didn't
Mhm.
pan out to that. And so I
Mhm.
think ultimately, and boundaries, like I said, I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
I felt like I had to set really like clear boundaries between us
Mhm.
because it was just again, it wasn't healthy,
Yeah.
is what
Yeah.
it boiled down to.
That whole like choosing what you share and how much you share with friends is so huge because for a long time my marriage was struggling. I didn't say a word to anybody, which is probably why I was depressed.
See,
Is
I couldn't
like,
keep it in
oh,
because I feel like it was gonna damage me more by not saying
mm-hmm,
anything than saying so. Because I'm always talking. I used to be. I'm
mm-hmm,
always on Facebook. I'm always, so it
yeah,
was hard for me to like act
mm-hmm.
as if nothing
Things are
was going on. Yeah.
mm, very interesting. So I'm going to transition to talking about you mentioned a public defender. How did you find, because you have to file in Maryland. I'm not familiar with the laws. But shout
Yeah.
out because I am from Maryland. Hey, DMV. I'm so silly. Well, how did you find the lawyer? How did you learn about the system, what you should do? Like, talk me through that process.
The way that I found out, so I had called. There was just we had it was times we've had like
Mm-hmm.
just some real serious times with police and whatever, and so of course
Okay.
when you call the
Mm-hmm.
police, it is recommended for you to either see like a domestic violence counselor. I mean,
Okay.
we had a situation in which like they asked if I wanted to testify against him. I waived
Oh
my right.
wow.
Yeah, it got serious.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Mm-hmm.
I waived my rights. And I think, again, for anyone who is going through any type of domestic violence, like, you want to, for the most part, a lot of times, I think women want to protect their abuser. So
Yeah.
it was just like, I didn't want
Mm-hmm.
to see him in jail. I didn't want to see him, I've had times, I think, where I bailed him out after, like,
Oh
it was
wow.
a full on,
Mm-hmm.
we had a full on, back and forth. And so, I so those resources sort of came with me filing reports, and and it
Mm-hmm.
became
Got you.
often
Mm-hmm.
enough where they're
Mm-hmm.
like, hey. And so again, I will say, and again, the reason I'm sharing some of this is because I do think it's important. So like a
Yeah.
person at my, I don't know, stature, maybe, like,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
like, education level, and not to
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
that people who don't, nothing like
No.
that, but
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
I look at myself a certain way, and I think you envision like, how is this happening to
To
me?
me.
you know, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, we've had certain times in which it was just like, I can't believe I'm going through this kind of thing. Like, you put
Mm-hmm.
yourself and you're like, how did I, get here into
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
kind of like situation?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that it was a little bit difficult
Mm-hmm.
for me to envision that it was something that I was even going through. And
Right.
so,
Right.
there was a lot of House of Roots support if I needed it, but I didn't go through with a lot of things because, again,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel good about it. Like, it made me
Okay.
feel like, how am I here? Why,
Yeah.
like, so there
Yeah.
was questioning of even that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so they gave a lot of resources,
Mm-hmm.
like, because it was like, do you move out and go into a shelter? Like, he wouldn't leave.
Oh
He where
snap.
we lived. He,
Yeah.
and so I just was like, no, I'm gonna, like, so I did other things, but resources came with that. And like, to
Oh,
get
that's
divorced, they did provide, some legal counseling and support and help as well.
oh, thank the Lord. And
Mhm.
how old was your son at the time? Because what was that like? What were you Was he seeing some of this? Like, talk to
He
me
did,
about that. Yeah.
unfortunately. Like,
Hmm.
my son was maybe around like 2, 3 years old when,
Okay. Okay.
a lot of it. So he does remember, like, the police were called, and I remember, and he kept that for a long time. Like, he brought
Mm.
that up for several years. And I mean, I
Mm.
think some of those things are some of the reasons why I ended up, having to end the relationship, because
Yeah.
I just didn't want my son to grow up in even the type of
Yeah.
environment with yelling and fighting
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
any of it.
Mhm.
So yeah, he definitely did witness some of it.
It's so interesting because for me, you could look at my ex-husband and I and not even think anything was wrong. It was just blindness in the house. And it wasn't like domestic abuse. It just was like two different ships sailing down two vastly different oceans. And I worried that my kids were watching, thinking that a marriage like this was
So, yeah,
normal. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And it was just like a lack of anything. And so even as I was going through, because I filed for divorce, the internal narrative in my mind was like, oh my God, I'm breaking up this home. And I almost was doubting myself because I was like, am I being selfish? And,
Yeah.
should like we tried the therapy, all the
Yeah.
things before we ended up down the divorce road. But I remember thinking about the kids and making sure that they saw, or I at least modeled for them what a healthy relationship looked like. And it
Right.
wasn't what was happening in our house. It was
Right.
like two business partners. And it was
Right.
like, and even now when I talk to my kids and they're teenagers now, my daughter, who child talk about she's me, would say I'd go to other people's houses who were married and I'd see how they would be, and you guys weren't like that. So even though they didn't have the language to
Right.
say,
They
what I
saw
mean, they
it.
still
They
picked
understood.
up a
Yeah.
hundred, a
Yeah.
hundred percent. So those folks who are thinking I'm gonna stay for the kids, what picture are you painting for
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
for that? Because trust, the kids just want you to be happy,
Right.
you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
And I hear that a lot. I stay for the kids, or I'm staying for the kids. Like, at what cost? Because
Right.
you're now painting this poor picture of what marriage and what a woman should be able to hold on to, what a man should be doing, etc.
Right.
So hopefully that helps. Now, in your processing, you mentioned therapy. Were you still in therapy, and how did
Yeah.
you process all these things? Yeah.
I ended up just staying in therapy for many years and just going by
Mm-hmm.
myself at that point because he
Mm-hmm.
was,
Mm-hmm.
he didn't want to be a part of therapy and
Right. Right.
counseling and,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And so, yeah, I just ended up going and getting the support that I needed for myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And even in therapy, because I remember we did therapy and I was in it, but it was almost like
Mhm.
I was dragging him to come
Right to
with. And
go.
then in therapy, they tell you couples therapy doesn't work unless there's individual therapy that's also happening. And
Right,
they
right,
recommend different therapists and then couples therapy. So for the person who's thinking, I'm going to drag my significant other, I'm going to drag my spouse to therapy, if they're not willing to do the work,
right.
it's moot, because you're
Yep,
going to heal and you're going to start seeing things differently. You're going to evolve. And then you're going to be with a person who's not doing the internal work. That also
yep,
is a sign, and that's information. What are you choosing to do with this information of this partner who's not wanting to do the work to get healthier or to make the marriage or the partnership better? So
right.
that's our 2 cents there. So I want to now talk about your current love story, your message.
Okay.
And you mentioned your partner. Talk to me about where you are now, what you've learned throughout this mess into message. And shout out to your shirt that says message on it. I need one. Talk to me about that.
I think that my current partner,
Mm,
we had a daughter a year ago, and she's about to be one
I can't
tomorrow.
believe it.
Yep, one
It's
already.
happening so quick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
So we had, we met and we were friends. He was actually also going through a divorce, and
Hmm.
we just really more met in the sense of crossing paths. And he's Jamaican and he's an entrepreneur, and
Hmm.
we just had so many things in common.
Hmm.
And we just really, it wasn't, I don't think, like attraction, like, oh, I want to get this person's number. It was more like, yo, this is cool. You doing this? Oh, let me know about your business. And, it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like camaraderie there. And,
Hmm.
maybe into the pandemic, we started really like getting into a relationship. And,
Hmm.
and then now, several years later, we've built family, it feels like,
Hmm.
together, and
Hmm.
partnership. And I don't think I really understood partnership,
Mm,
before meeting him.
mhm.
I think I had a
Mm,
perception of partnership,
mhm,
but I feel like he really opened my eyes to what partnership is.
mhm,
So even when it comes to my son, he calls him his son. And and he's like, and he
Okay.
thinks about the things that, and it's been beautiful for my son to see also the flip
Yeah.
side of like what partnership looks like,
Look.
so
Mm-hmm.
my son will call him before he even calls me. And so
Mm-hmm.
and so it's like really beautiful. Like I'm happy my son has that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then now we're raising a daughter, and in a loving space, and he has two kids as well. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that it's been beautiful to sort of go through this journey that is by far not perfect, but it's
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
great because it's been loving. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's there's a lot of compassion, there's a lot of like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that's the stuff that matters. There's a lot of, and I'm still learning because
Yeah.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
stuff that I don't want to compromise with. But he's been teaching me like you have
Yeah.
to have a level of compromise with some stuff. And so but we're friends, and this is kind
Mm-hmm.
of the first time that I'm really dating and having partnership with somebody that's like my friend. So
Mm-hmm.
I deeply care about like his well-being. I
I
deeply
love
care
that.
about like what he wants to do with his life, how he wants
Mm-hmm.
to get there. Like those things matter to me. And just even to the point where it's like, I mean, I hope we are forever, but I'm like so invested that even if it isn't forever, I want to help him get there. Like that's, and I feel the same for me. Like, and I think that
Yeah.
I'm hoping that's the key to longevity with a
Mm-hmm.
relationship.
Mm-hmm.
He's so invested in me, and I'm super invested in him just as a
Mm-hmm.
human, that it
Love
goes
that.
beyond like the relationship and love part of
Mm-hmm.
it. And we cheer each other on. We tap in all the time. We communicate really well. We ask
Mm-hmm.
questions. So it's really different. And so
Mm-hmm.
though, like I said, it's not perfect. We got a lot of things we're trying to like figure out.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's been like so beautiful because it's again peaceful. This is a very
Mm-hmm.
peaceful relationship. Like we
Mm-hmm.
don't, we don't really fuss. I don't think we've definitely gotten upset at each other,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
not raised voices, not,
Yeah.
called out, called you out your name, not
Yeah. Yeah.
disrespectful, not, none of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been beautiful, like honestly, the peace, like, and I think when
Love
you
that.
find that, you're like, wow, I didn't even know that really like exists, especially if you're coming from turmoil.
That's perfect. Perfectly imperfect. You talk about learning about partnership. What are some of the what were some of your perceptions in partnerships, and how has that shifted?
Yeah, I think with partnership, I think that you almost think about role play, like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
what's the man's role? What's the women's role? And
Mm-hmm.
again, this is where, I kind of just scroll past all these social media stuff these days, and I'm just
Right.
whatever. But I think that, it's more like, what's the support role? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's now my vision of partnership. Not that I'm saying that I do feel like that there's gonna be times where I'm leaning on him really heavy, and there's gonna be times he's leaning on me really heavy.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
the balance of holding each other up and making sure
Mm-hmm.
that you're not weighing me down. Like that's the difference. And so I think now within partnership, like I'm hitting him up to say like, hey, what is there? That you need for the day, or let's get like some stuff organized so that we know that, it'll make the day better. Or he'll message me and say, hey, what do you need at the shop? Like, hey, did you eat already? Hey, did you get,
Oh,
like to me, those things are partnership, because you truly are, balancing and caring about the well-being of your partner. And
mm-hmm.
so even when it comes to my son, or like I try to do for his daughter, whatever it is,
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
it's just partnership is just how are you making it easier for the other
Other
part,
part.
or the other
You know
person.
what? When someone says, "Did you eat already?" That's like ding, ding, ding. Oh,
Love
want to get
language.
something to eat?
Love
Sure.
language. Yeah.
Love
No,
language.
that's it's golden.
It's so golden. So we're gonna wind down our conversation. I know it flew by. When I think about your whole, your entire, your journey, and the many messages within your mess, air quote, what would you say is your lived truth?
I think my lived truth is that you'll make it through your mess. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like it hasn't been an easy road.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sometimes you think like, oh my gosh, how am I going to make it through this?
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think that you definitely can live through your mess.
Oh, perfect. Live through your mess. I feel like there's a partnership there.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
thank you again for being so open, sharing some things you probably never shared before. I appreciate that. I'm sure there's someone who heard that and maybe that helps them to their next and through their mess. So I just really wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart and thank you so much for sharing. And to my listener or listeners, thank you all for your time and thanks for listening. Until next time.